Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been volunteering at our local history museum for about 3 years now. After my grandma passed away, my therapist suggested finding something meaningful to do with my time, something that would help me feel connected to others while working through my trauma. The museum seemed perfect since I'd always loved history, and my grandma used to take me there every summer when I was little. Today started like any other shift. I guided visitors through our new World War II exhibit, answered questions about local artifacts, and helped a group of excited kindergartners understand why we keep old stuff in glass cases. But it's what happened at the end of my shift that really got to me. I was in the break room with two other volunteers, an elderly retired doctor who's become something of a mentor to me, and this other woman who never seems to stop talking. We were all getting ready to leave when the topic of childcare came up. The talkative woman started going on about how things were better in her day, claiming that parents knew how to raise kids properly back then. She praised physical punishment and criticized modern parenting approaches, saying all this coddling was making children soft. The doctor quickly disagreed, explaining that research had shown how physical punishment could cause lasting psychological damage. She expressed relief that society was more aware of children's mental health nowadays, but the talkative woman wouldn't back down. She scoffed and insisted that children were resilient, claiming that no matter how they were treated, they'd still grow up, so it couldn't be that bad. That's when something inside me snapped. I'd been quiet until then, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. I interrupted to tell her that it actually could be that bad, and that I was living proof. When she asked what I meant, I explained about my parents and their version of tough love. I told her about being locked in dark closets for hours, having food withheld as punishment, and being told daily how worthless I was. I asked her if she wanted to know what that does to a person. The break room got very quiet. Even our chatty colleague seemed uncomfortable, but I wasn't done. I continued explaining how I couldn't feel emotions properly anymore, describing how they were there somewhere, but behind a thick wall I couldn't break through. I told them about feeling nothing when my parents died last year, no sadness, no relief, nothing. But when my grandma passed away, the only person who ever showed me real love, my body reacted even though my mind couldn't process it. The doctor recognized my symptoms and asked if I had developed broken heart syndrome, mentioning she'd seen several cases during her practice. I confirmed this, describing the weeks of medical tests I went through because of the severe chest pains. I explained how the doctors initially thought it was a heart attack and how they discovered that emotional trauma can literally break your heart, even when you can't feel the emotions anymore. The talkative woman could barely speak, just stammering that she had no idea. The doctor then shared stories about patients she'd treated with similar experiences, one who developed severe ulcers from childhood abuse stress, another with chronic migraines from years of emotional trauma. She explained how the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. I delivered my final point then, telling them that no, children don't just grow up when they're abused. I explained how they grow up broken and some stay that way. Just then, our museum director walked in to tell us it was time to leave. The talkative woman gathered her things quickly, avoiding eye contact with everyone. As she hurried toward the door, she stopped briefly, starting to apologize but not finishing her sentence before rushing out. The doctor squeezed my shoulder gently as we walked to the parking lot, telling me I'd done good that day and that sometimes people need to hear the hard truth to understand. I nodded, feeling that familiar numbness where other people might feel pride or satisfaction. But for the first time in a while, I felt like my inability to feel emotions had served a purpose. Maybe my story would make that woman think twice before dismissing the impact of childhood trauma. And maybe, just maybe, she'd share what she learned with others who needed to hear it too. I've been a truck driver for 15 years now, hauling cargo across the country to support my family. My wife and I have 2 kids in college, and this job has always put food on the table. Sure, the hours are long and I miss home sometimes, but I love what I do. There's something peaceful about being on the open road, watching the sunrise while other people are still sleeping. Last week, though, I experienced something that made me question whether I wanted to keep doing this job. It started as a regular Tuesday morning. I had just picked up a full load of electronics from a warehouse in Atlanta, heading to Dallas. The GPS showed clear weather and traffic was lighter than usual. Perfect driving conditions. I was about 2 hours into my drive when I noticed a white SUV weaving through traffic behind me. The driver was obviously in a hurry, cutting off other cars and tailgating anyone who wouldn't move fast enough. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, hoping they'd just pass by without incident. But of course, that's not what happened. The SUV pulled up right behind my truck and started honking repeatedly. I maintained my speed and stayed in my lane. There was another truck passing me on the left, so I couldn't move over yet. That's when things got crazy. The SUV driver, a woman who I'd later start referring to as Karen in my police report, swerved into the left lane, accelerated past me, then cut back in front so close that I had to hit my brakes hard. My dash cam caught everything that happened next. Karen stuck her head out of her window and started yelling at me, calling me a stupid truck driver, and telling me to learn how to drive. I stayed calm and spoke into my radio, alerting other drivers about the white SUV that had just cut me off. I gave them the license plate number and mentioned that the driver seemed aggressive. That's when several other truck drivers on the same route started responding to my broadcast. One driver radioed in saying they could see her about half a mile ahead and were catching up. Another driver chimed in that they were about 2 minutes behind me and had their dash cam running. I thought that would be the end of it. Usually these road rage incidents die down once the angry driver gets ahead, but Karen had other plans. She kept brake checking me, forcing me to slow down more and more. Then something happened that still gives me chills. She rolled down her window and I saw something metallic in her hand. I quickly radioed to the other drivers that she had a gun and was armed. The next few seconds felt like slow motion. I heard 2 loud pops and my passenger side mirror shattered. She had actually shot at my truck on a highway in broad daylight. That's when my fellow truckers sprang into action like nothing I'd ever seen before. Within minutes, 5 trucks had coordinated through the radio and positioned themselves around Karen's SUV. 1 in front, 1 behind, and 3 in the adjacent lanes, essentially boxing her in. Karen started screaming out her window, telling us to get away from her and that we couldn't do this. Another truck driver radioed that they'd called the State Patrol, who were 5 minutes out and told us to just keep her boxed in. Karen tried everything to escape. She attempted to squeeze between trucks, tried to force her way onto the shoulder, and kept screaming threats out her window. But there was nowhere for her to go. We gradually slowed the whole convoy down, forcing her to reduce speed with us. When we finally came to a stop, there were 3 State Patrol cars waiting with lights flashing. The look on Karen's face when she realized she was surrounded by both trucks and law enforcement was utterly satisfying. She tried to play victim, but there was no escaping what she'd done. Karen tried telling the police officers that we truck drivers had been harassing her, claiming we trapped her and that she was just defending herself. But the police officer quickly shut her down, informing her that they had dash cam footage from 6 different vehicles showing her firing a weapon on a public highway. It turned out Karen had an expired license and an unregistered firearm in her vehicle. The officers found crystal meth in her purse, which explained a lot about her behavior. A week later, I testified at her preliminary hearing. The judge watched all the dash cam footage, including the shots she fired at my truck. Between the weapons charges, the drugs, and the attempted vehicular assault, she was looking at serious prison time. The prosecutor told me she'd likely serve at least 10 years. The other truck drivers who helped me that day, we still keep in touch on the radio. There's an unspoken brotherhood among truckers that most people don't understand. We look out for each other because sometimes, out on the open road, that's all we've got. The company I work for gave me a week off after the incident with pay. They even offered to put me on a different route, but I declined. I won't let one person's crazy actions change how I feel about my job or the open road. Besides, now I've got an even better story to tell my grandkids someday about why they shouldn't mess with truck drivers. As for my broken mirror, the company replaced it, but I kept a small piece of the shattered one. It sits on my dashboard now. 2 years ago, I married the man of my dreams, a successful business consultant who happened to have an 11-year-old daughter from his previous marriage. I knew what I was signing up for, or at least I thought I did. My husband and I met at a charity event where we both volunteered. After a year of dating, he proposed and I said yes without hesitation. His ex-wife wasn't exactly thrilled about our relationship, but I tried not to let it bother me. Their daughter, however, that was a different story. From day one, his daughter made it clear she didn't want me in their lives. I get it. Divorce is hard on kids, and seeing your dad with someone new must be tough. So, I tried my best to be understanding. I cooked her favorite meals, cleaned up after her without complaint, and gave her space when she needed it. But nothing seemed to work. My husband works long hours from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., so I'm usually the one handling any emergencies that come up during the day. That's exactly what happened yesterday when I got a call from her school at 1 p.m. The school secretary told me that my stepdaughter had gotten into a physical fight with another student and requested that I come to the school immediately. I told her I would be there right away. When I arrived at the school, I found quite the welcoming committee in the principal's office. There was the principal himself, my stepdaughter, a 13-year-old girl with a split lip, and what I assumed were her parents. The moment I walked in, all eyes turned to me, and not in a friendly way. The principal greeted me with obvious disdain, identifying me as the stepmother and pointing out that my stepdaughter had caused quite a disturbance. Before I could respond, the other girl's father jumped in, suggesting that this kind of behavior stems from improper guidance at home. When I expressed my confusion, the other girl's mother made it worse by directly implying that my stepdaughter's attitude and aggression were learned from me. They were actually blaming me for this situation. I tried to understand how this could possibly be my fault, but before I could finish my thought, my stepdaughter started yelling. She accused me of trying to act like her mom when I wasn't and claimed I was the reason for her behavior. I felt my blood pressure rising. Here I was, being accused of somehow corrupting this child whom I'd been nothing but kind to, despite her constant rejection. I attempted to clarify my position, explaining that while I was indeed her stepmother, my involvement in her upbringing was minimal. I told them that I made sure she was fed and safe when she was with us, but I wasn't responsible for her behavior. The principal tried to lecture me about my responsibilities as a parental figure, but before he could finish, my stepdaughter's mother burst into the office. When she saw me there, her expression turned sour. She demanded to know why I was there instead of her ex-husband. I explained that since her ex-husband was at work, the school had called me as I was listed as an emergency contact. After that, the ex-wife took over, discussing the situation with the principal while shooting me dirty looks. Eventually, they decided to suspend my stepdaughter for 3 days. Since I was the only one available, I had to drive her home. The car ride was anything but peaceful. My stepdaughter blamed me entirely for her suspension, saying that a real mom would have taken the blame for her. I responded by telling her that a real mom would actually make her take responsibility for her own actions, reminding her that getting into a fight was her choice, not mine. She then screamed that she hated me and accused me of ruining everything. I told her that what she was doing was trying to avoid consequences by blaming others and that it wasn't going to work. When we got home, I called my husband and explained everything. To my relief, he fully supported my position and had a long talk with his daughter that evening. He also called his ex-wife and made it clear that the blame shifting needed to stop. The next morning, the principal called to apologize for how the situation was handled, admitting they had been unprofessional in allowing others to blame me without cause. My stepdaughter is still giving me the silent treatment, but honestly, it's better than the constant accusations. My husband and I have decided to start family counseling, not because I'm to blame for anything, but because this family clearly needs help learning how to communicate and cope with change. I met my girlfriend 3 years ago at a mutual friend's barbecue. She was already in the military when we met, and things moved pretty quickly between us. Within 6 months, we were talking about buying a house together. I should have seen the red flags, but you know what they say about love being blind. We found this beautiful 3-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. The market was competitive, but we managed to secure it. I put down most of the down payment, about 85% of it. She insisted on having her name on the deed since we were building our future together. I agreed, thinking it was a reasonable request given our relationship. Fast forward to now, and I've been the one handling all the financial responsibilities. Every single mortgage payment, utility bill, property tax, everything has been coming from my account. She's been stationed at different bases, so I've been maintaining the house alone too. New roof? That was me. Broken water heater? Me again. Landscaping? All me. The problem started when I began noticing some concerning behavior. She became distant, and whenever I tried to discuss our financial situation, she'd shut down the conversation. The only thing she'd say about the house was refinance it. Whatever that was supposed to mean. I recently tried calling her to discuss the house situation. I explained that I'd been handling all the payments and felt we needed to reassess our arrangement. She immediately brushed me off, saying she didn't have time for this. When I pointed out that she hadn't contributed anything in months and we needed to figure this out, she just repeated her usual line about refinancing if there were problems. I tried to explain that the real issue was her name on the deed, but she cut me off, claiming she had training and would call back. She never did. I decided to reach out to her military leadership to discuss the situation. That's when things got really interesting. Her commanding officer scheduled a meeting with me. During our meeting, he asked about the situation with our shared property. I explained how I'd been solely responsible for all payments and maintenance, but she was refusing to discuss removing her name from the deed. When he asked if I had documented all my contributions, I confirmed that I had every receipt and bank statement. That's when he told me that her behavior could potentially fall under Article 134, which he explained was part of the Uniform Code of Military Justice dealing with conduct on becoming of a service member. That conversation was eye-opening. I immediately started gathering all my documentation, every mortgage payment, every repair bill, every improvement receipt. 3 years' worth of financial records showing I'd invested over $175,000 into the property while she had contributed barely $5,000. I contacted the lawyer and scheduled an appointment for January. The lawyer's office asked me to bring all my documentation, which I've organized meticulously. I'm also in talks with the loan company about refinancing the mortgage solely in my name. Yesterday, she finally called. She was angry about me contacting her commanding officer. When I explained that I had tried talking to her first multiple times, she became even more furious, saying I had no right to involve her chain of command. I stood my ground, pointing out that I had every right since she was on the deed of a house she'd barely contributed to. She threatened to fight me on this, claiming she was entitled to half of everything. I told her that I'd spoken with a lawyer and had documented everything, giving her the choice to do this the easy way or the hard way. She tried to use her active service as a shield, but when I reminded her about Article 134, she suddenly changed her tone. After a moment of silence, she asked what I wanted. I told her to sign the quitclaim deed when I send it so we could both move on. When she asked about the consequences of refusing, I explained that we'd let the military justice system and civilian courts decide, reminding her about my 3 years of documented evidence showing her lack of contribution. She hung up abruptly, but an hour later, I received a text saying she'd sign the papers when they're ready. The loan company has already pre-approved me for refinancing based on my credit and payment history, so I'm just waiting for my lawyer appointment to get everything properly arranged. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.